biological males shouldn't be able to identify themselves into girls' and women's sports. There, I said it. It's scientific. It's common sense. And even if you pretend it's not, deep down, you know that 5 or 10 years ago, you would have said it too without hesitation. And yet, here we are in 2025, where I'm bringing you another report that shows that while our American neighbors are starting to see sanity return to women's sports thanks to President Trump's executive order banning biological males who identify as women competing against women in their categories as though they are women, Canadians are still stuck in bizarro land on the issue. Case in point, an Abbotsford school trustee is now under review and has calls to be censured for not misconduct, not corruption, but daring to commend the executive order in a social media post. And I've just learned that his colleague who dared to like his post could be next. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and don't you just love this site? I seriously don't think I've had enough of reporting on this iconic, long overdue moment when Trump, surrounded by female athletes and their coaches, signed this Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports executive order to do just that. But when Abbotsford school trustee Jared White dared to take to Facebook to state the following, the legacy media and the Abbotsford School Board saw it differently. White wrote, "No more biological males in women and girls sports. No more biological males in women and girls bathrooms and locker rooms. No more teaching vulnerable children that they can be both genders or neither. Common sense is making a comeback, and it's about time." Preach it. Now, after that, the legacy media snatched White's post to run with their "Trustee White is pro-Trump and anti-trans" tales. The board's chair, Shirley Wilson, and Superintendent Sean Nosek were quick to throw White under the bus by releasing the following important statement. It says, "Statements made by Trustee White on a recent social media post do not reflect the views of the board and do not align with our statutory obligations, policies, and values. The Abbotsford Board of Education is committed to ensuring safe, inclusive, and welcoming spaces for all students and staff regardless of gender identity or expression." Yes, safe and inclusive to all students and staff, except the ones that don't want the opposite sex in what should be their safe, physically competitive, and private spaces for girls. The board further stated that they are taking this matter seriously and reviewing it in accordance with their established processes. I caught up with White in person recently when he came out to take a further stand for women and girls' right to safe and fair sports by attending a Columbia Bible College women's basketball Bearcats game after their head coach, Taylor Claggett, had been suspended by the league after she raised concerns about her players having to compete against Vancouver Island Mariners' 6'2" trans star player who you see bulldozing through her team here in number 23. You can find out more about that story and how you can take action to demand the Bearcats coach be returned back to them at our special website called protectfemaleathletes.com. But here is a clip of what White had to say about why he's standing firm on the issue.
Well, I do believe what President Trump did was common sense. I do not believe that biological males should be competing with females, and that's, of course, why I'm here today. You know, I think that Taylor really has been a victim of aggressive partisans, and they're coming from this radical gender ideology. That's correct. And at the end of the day, really all the women are asking for is fairness and safety. That's really what it comes down to. And I think that's what that bill was all about in the States. It's nothing to do with whether you like or don't like Donald Trump. It really just has to do with a common sense policy that I believe is in the best interest of women and girls. And I have 2 daughters, and so I want to stand up for women and girls.
So does White's opinion happen to align with most of those in his community? Considering the many reports I've brought you about Abbotsford's large protests that have hit the streets against gender ideology program called SOGI 123 being taught in schools, or all the community members that came out daily to feed and support those who camped 24/7 overnight against it. Or the fact that people in Abbotsford ridings voted BC Conservative MLAs in every riding in the last election. A party that made it very clear that they would remove Soji from schools if elected, and had already proposed a bill to restore fairness in women's sports by keeping males out of them, which, go figure, was shut down by our socialist NDP. I think the answer is a clear yes. But what about the rest of Canada? When it comes to Trump's executive order, we know his common sense action represents that of the majority of opinions of his people. In 2023, a Gallup survey showed that 70% of Americans believe that one's biological sex should dictate what sports category they're eligible to compete in, aka men play in the men's league and women's play in the women's league, regardless of how they identify. And just last year, a New York ISPOS survey found that it's actually closer to 80% now who believe that biological males who think they are women should not be allowed to compete in women's sports. And contrary to what the legacy media would have you believe, that opinion includes what the vast majority, 67%, of Democrats also believe. But again, what do Canadians think? Well, in 2022, with the help of our generous donors, Rebel News actually hired Leger, the largest Canadian-owned market research company, to ask that question, and found that 44% of Canadians would actually support laws that ban biological males from competing in women's sports, with 35% opposed to such. The rest, well, they were pretty much on the fence. I wish I could tell you the results of more Canadian polls on this issue to see if that group has since made up their minds, but I can't, because when Sport Canada tried to ask the same thing, the so-called inclusive rainbow activists that love to call differing opinions to theirs hate came after Sport Canada for daring to use the term biological males to describe biological males who identify as women. And after pressure, Sport Canada abandoned the survey, which means they abandoned giving you the truth about what Canadians actually think. But it's not just anti-science trans activists who take issue with biology these days. It seems it's the woke Abbottsford School Union as well, because since interviewing Mr. White and the others who came out to support the Bearcats that day, I've learned that the woke Abbottsford Teachers Union, with Doug Smullen sitting as their president, that the union has come out not just to condemn Trustee White, but also his colleague, Trustee Mike Roush, too. Forget this, the common sense thought crime of daring to press like on White's post. Now, I've posted the union's full rant in the written article for this report, which you can find in the description box below, but let me read you some of it. In the midst of recent district reports outlining that only 55% of Abbotsford students agree that their school is a place where they belong, it is extremely disappointing for Abbotsford teachers to see statements made by school trustee Jared White and the support of these statements received from Trustee Mike Roush that the eradication of human rights to transgender people is simply a diverse opinion. More like a dominant opinion carried by a diverse amount of people, if you ask me. And maybe some of the students don't feel like they belong due to their schools pushing an ideology on them that they don't believe and don't want to believe, and they feel like their form of expression would be vilified if they spoke up for themselves. After all, I previously reported on how when there was a nationwide skip school day to stand against gender ideology being taught in schools back in 2023, Abbotsford had one of the largest absentee rates for that day. A whopping 38% of their students didn't show up to school. But here's where these member paid-for union activists prove they're even more out of touch. They say Mr. White and Mr. Roush need to move the conversation away from myths, fears, stereotypes, and instead focus their attention on supporting all students who are entitled to safe, supportive school environment in Abbotsford. Stereotypes and myths? You mean like the Abbotsford Bearcats trying to get to nationals, but being stuck in second place next to VIU because VIU's top player is a male kind of myth, right? What do the younger female basketball players in their district have to look up to if teachers' unions keep pressuring the board or teachers to be punished because they spoke up on their behalf? And there's no human right that trans people don't have in Canada that others do. The same way I can't self-identify as a baby and then demand that a daycare give me diapers like this guy does, is the same logic behind why males shouldn't be able to identify their way into women and girls' spaces. But it gets worse. The union then goes on to call for both Roush and White to be censured by the board and removed from district events wherein trustees interact with students and staff, suggesting that standing up for women and girls is something that makes you unfit to be around children in the district, most of whom your statements represent. But I think Jared White is right about something he wrote down there. He said that common sense is making a comeback. People are tired of staying quiet. Big tech is no longer censoring the logical side of this debate. The Budweisers have been spanked, and it's only a matter of time before school trustees wake up too. Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. If you want to take a stand for fairness and safety in women's sports, I've got a way for you to do so in just a matter of seconds. Go to our special website called protectfemalaathletes.com and click on our email campaign demanding to the right people that Coach Taylor Claggett be unsuspended and back with her Bearcats team. And while you're there, you can check out our new merchandise to share the message, which also says protect female athletes, and use coupon code DREA10 to save when you do.